Good morning students. Today you have a lecture on typhoid fever. Learning objectives. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to describe the epidemiological determinants of typhoid fever, describe the clinical features including complications of typhoid fever, and then discuss the prevention and control strategies. Typhoid fever. It is a result of systemic infection of S. typhi and it is only found in man. Now this term enteric fever, it includes both typhoid and the paratyphoid fevers. So what happens in typhoid fever is clinically it is characterized by typical continuous fever which is usually for 3 to 4 weeks. And the another important sign what we see is relative bradycardia, okay, with involvement of lymphoid tissues, which is a very important sign what we see in typhoid fever. Now moving on to the epidemiological determinants of typhoid fever. So under epidemiological determinants, the first important part that we would discuss is the agent factors. Now in agent factors, the agent for typhoid fever is S. typhi. It's a major cause of enteric fever. The others relatively infrequent ones are the S para A and S para B. And now about the S. typhi, the antigens what it has. There are three main antigens, O, H and Vi. And we have a number of phage types, at least 80 different phage types are there. Now what is this phage typing? It's important as it has proved a useful epidemiological tool in tracing the source of epidemics. That's why it is very important. Now Salmonella typhi, it usually survives intracellularly in the tissues of various organs, and it can be readily killed by drying, pasteurization and common disinfectants. Now reservoir of infection. So as I already told you that Salmonella typhi is only present in man. So the reservoir of infection is also only man, and in man it is the cases and carriers which are very important and you should know about it. Now cases. Now what is a case? A case is infectious as long as the bacilli appear in stools or urine, and carriers are persons who excrete the bacillus for more than a year after a clinical attack. And when I'm saying more than a year, then we call it as a chronic carrier. Among carriers also you have various different types of carriers. Now let's see how can we classify these carriers. Carriers could be classified into temporary and chronic carriers. So chronic, I just told you, those who are carrying it for more than a year. Okay. So in temporary carriers you have incubatory carriers and convalescent carriers. I hope you have come across these words several times, like what is incubation period and what is convalescence period, and people who are carriers during the incubatory period, that is they are usually known as the incubatory carriers. And convalescent carriers are once they have finished with their signs and symptoms, so they are in this convalescence period, and those carriers are known as convalescent carriers. Now they excrete the bacillus for 6 to 8 weeks, okay, after which their number usually reduces very rapidly. By the end of 3 months, not more than 4% of cases are still excreting the organisms. Okay, and by the end of 1 year, it is around 3%. So when we are speaking about this chronic carriers, that is after this period, that is after 1 year. Okay, and most of these chronic carriers, the organism is in the gallbladder and in the biliary tract. A chronic carrier state may be expected to develop in 2 to 5% of the cases. Okay. So a very good example for chronic carrier is the typhoid Mary. Okay, you might have heard about her several times. Whenever we discuss about typhoid, we do mention about this chronic carrier. Okay, so she gave rise to more than 1,300 cases in her. Source of infection. The primary source of infection are feces and urine of cases or carriers, and then the secondary sources are sources like water, food, fingers, and flies, which are contaminated by feces and urine of these cases or carriers. Now moving to the host factors. The important host factors are age, sex, immunity. Okay, so we would just discuss all these points one by one. Now coming to the age factors. Typhoid fever, it may occur at any age, but the highest incidence of this disease occurs in 5 to 19 years of age group. So you need to remember this 5 to 19. Some other points or some other studies related to this age factor is that when a prospective population based surveillance was done in Asian urban slums, it was seen that the most common age group that was got was 5 to 15. So very close to what we have just discussed. So that was the age group which was got. The annual incidence of blood culture confirmed typhoid fever could reach about 180 to 494 per 1 lakh cases. Okay, so again in some areas it was seen that the preschool age children, that is less than 5 years, also showed similar incidence. So now when we are speaking that it is the highest incidence is between this age group 5 to 19, but it was even noticed that in the preschool age group children also, they had similar incidence rates. So the incidence highest being in 5 to 19, and again even in the preschool you're finding the incidence being similar. But when you go above the age of 20, so the incidence was falling down, and this could be because of immunity from clinical or subclinical infections. Now moving to sex. So it was seen that more cases were among males. So it could be because of increased exposure to infection. But when we speak about carrier rate, it was more in females. Immunity. Now immunity maybe or the antibodies could be developed after infection or by immunization. But what has been noticed is the antibody to the somatic antigen O, it is usually higher in patient with the disease. Okay, and the antibody to the flagellar antigen H is usually higher in these immunized individuals. So this was being noticed. Then the serum antibodies are not the primary defenses against infection. This S. typhi being an intracellular organism, the cell mediated immunity plays a very important role. Now natural typhoid fever, it does not always confer solid immunity. Second attacks have been seen usually when the immune system is challenged with a very large oral dose. Okay, so among the host factors that contribute to resistance to S. typhi are gastric acidity and local intestinal immunity. Environmental and social factors. Typhoid fevers could be seen all over the year, but the peak incidence is seen in July to September. So this period coincides with the rainy season, and we can see that after rains there is an increase in fly population. So few other points is outside the human body, this bacillus is found in so many other places like in water, few other eatables like, or you can see in milk, soil. But what you need to remember is that typhoid bacillus will not multiply in water. They usually perish within 48 hours, and sometimes they can survive up to 7 days. It has seen that in ice cream or under such conditions, it can even survive for a month. Okay, and it can survive up to 70 days in soil irrigated with sewage under moist winter conditions, and for half that period under this drier summer conditions. Now moving on to food. So food is a bad conductor of heat. So it provides a shelter to these bacillus, and they usually multiply, and they can live there for some time in food. Now another important thing is typhoid bacillus. They grow very rapidly in milk. They multiply and they grow without even changing the taste or the appearance of milk. And about vegetables which are grown in sewage farms or washed with contaminated water, they are a very important health hazard. And few other social factors which could contribute for this increased number of cases are, you can see that where there is pollution of this drinking water supplies, where there is open air defecation and urination, overall the food and personal hygiene is low, and there is a lot of ignorance. So in such conditions you can see increased number of typhoid cases. Okay, so overall you can see that typhoid fever could be regarded as an index of general sanitation in any country. About the incubation period, it is usually 10 to 14 days, and it can be as short as 3 days and as long as 3 weeks. Modes of transmission. The important mode is the fecal-oral route, okay, and the urine-oral route, and this is the direct one, and there could even be indirect ways, like when the hands or any food is contaminated with any of the fecal or the urine, okay, which is which has these bacilli. Now I feel everybody knows about these different factors, that is the water, soil, flies, fingers. So all these, when they get contaminated with feces and urine, and then that means all these things which have the bacillus, and they contaminate the food, okay, the raw, the cooked food, and that is had by healthy people, so it can have, they can have infection. Clinical features. The onset is insidious, but in children it could be abrupt with chills and high fever. Prodromal stage is present. There is malaise, headache, cough, sore throat, abdominal pain and constipation. The fever which is present is of a step ladder fashion. After 7 to 10 days, the fever reaches a plateau. After that, the patient starts looking toxic. He appears exhausted. Okay. Usually there is marked constipation which is seen, but especially in the early stage you can see another important finding, that is the pea soup diarrhea, and there is marked abdominal distension. Another important signs that could be seen are, there is leukopenia, okay, then the urine and blood culture could be positive. Then about the physical findings, what we see, there could be splenomegaly, abdominal distension, tenderness, relative bradycardia, dicrotic pulse, and occasionally meningismus could be seen. Now about the another important sign that is seen is the rose spots. It is a rash which commonly appears during the second week of the disease, and it's an individual spot which is found mainly on the trunk. It's a pink papule around 2 to 3 millimeters in diameter that usually fades on pressure. It disappears in 3 to 4 days. If there are no complications, the patient's condition will improve within 7 to 10 days. There could be relapse that could occur for up to 2 weeks after termination of the therapy. Complications. So what complications can we see is that serious complications could occur in up to 10% of typhoid fever patients. Okay, and especially in those who have been ill for a longer period, that is more than 2 weeks. Okay, and or those who have not taken proper treatment. So what complications we could see is intestinal hemorrhage. Okay, and what is usually seen is there is sudden drop in temperature. You can see signs of shock. Okay, followed by dark or fresh blood in the stools. There could be intestinal perforation also, which could happen usually in the 3rd week. We have few less frequent complications like the urinary retention, pneumonia, thrombophlebitis, myocarditis, then psychosis, cholecystitis, nephritis, and osteomyelitis. Lab diagnosis of typhoid. Okay, now it could be divided into the microbiological procedures and the serological procedures. Now in microbiology, what we usually see is that this isolation of S. typhi from blood, bone marrow, and stools. Blood culture is the mainstay of diagnosis of this disease. Now serological procedures, that is the Felix Vidal test, which measures the agglutinating antibody levels against the O and H antigens. And usually the O antibodies appear on day 6 to 8 and H antibodies on day 10 to 12 after the onset of the disease. Now about this Vidal test. The test has only moderate sensitivity and specificity. It could be negative in up to 30% of culture proven cases of typhoid. Now after this you should know that the reasons for such kind of errors. That is this S. typhi, it shares O and H antigens with other Salmonella serotypes and has cross-reacting epitomes and other with other Enterobacteriaceae. Okay, and this could lead to the false positive results. So sometimes you could have a positive result of this test in certain clinical conditions like malaria, typhus, bacteremia caused by any other organisms, and cirrhosis. New diagnostic test. So in the new diagnostic test we have IDL-Tubex test. It can detect IgM09 antibodies from patients within a few minutes. And another rapid serological test is the TyphiDot, which takes 3 hours to perform, and this was developed in Malaysia for the detection of this specific IgM and IgG antibodies against a 50 kD antigen of Salmonella typhi. We have a newer version of this test, that is the TyphiDot-M, which was developed to detect specific IgM antibodies. Then the DIP test, which was developed in Netherlands. It's based on the binding of S. typhi specific IgM antibodies in samples to S. typhi lipopolysaccharide antigen and the staining of these bond antibodies by an anti-human IgM antibody, which is conjugated to a colloidal dye particle. Okay, so these are the 3 important newer diagnostic tests, that is the IDL-Tubex test, TyphiDot, and then the dipstick test. Now control of typhoid fever. So in control of typhoid fever, you need to remember 3 important things, that is the control of reservoir, then control of sanitation and immunization. So in most of these diseases, like the diseases with the fecal-oral mode of transmission, we have discussed about this control of sanitation, and plays a very, very important role in controlling the disease. So let's see all of these three important steps what I just told you to control typhoid fever. The first one I told you, reservoir. Now we need to understand that in typhoid, what I've been telling you from the beginning, that it is that man is the only host. Okay, so the disease is only in man. So when we are speaking of controlling the reservoir, it is a control of infection in human. So this could be again discussed under cases and carriers. Okay, so the usual methods of control of reservoir are their identification, isolation, treatment and disinfection. Okay, so in cases, the important points are early diagnosis, then notification, isolation and treatment. About early diagnosis. Now it's very important because usually the early symptoms are non-specific. So culture of blood and stools are important investigations to be done. Notification, it should be done where such notification is mandatory. Now isolation. Isolation is a very important point here when we are speaking about control of reservoir and especially of the cases. As the typhoid fever, it has a very prolonged case, and the cases could be infectious. So what is usually important is that it is better to transfer these cases to hospital where they can get the proper treatment and they can prevent the spread of the disease. So as a rule, these cases should be isolated till 3 bacteriologically negative stools and urine reports are got on 3 separate days. Okay, so this is a very important point, that isolation. We are speaking about isolation. Now, what is the duration for which these cases should be isolated is up to 3 samples what we are getting. Okay, that is the stools and urine samples should be negative on 3 separate days. Okay, then about the treatment, fluoroquinolones is widely regarded as the drug of choice because it is inexpensive, well tolerated, more rapidly and reliably effective than the previous first line drugs that were used. Okay, then a word about seriously ill and toxic cases. So in this case we need to give hydrocortisone 100 milligrams daily for 3 to 4 days. Then about disinfection. Now disinfection, usually all the stools and urine, they're collected in this closed containers. Okay, always collected in these containers and then it's disinfected. For disinfection we can use 5% Cresol for at least 2 hours. Then about the clothes which are there, they should be soaked in a solution of 2% chlorine and then steam sterilized. And another most important point here is hand washing of the treating doctor, nurses. So whenever they are whenever they have handled anything, so it's the best thing that they should disinfect their hands. Then the follow-up. In follow-up, what has to be done is the stool and urine examinations. Okay, that has to be carried out. So when we are going to do this follow-up, that is after 3 to 4 months and then after 12 months. So usually here what we are going to see is for the carrier state, and if we diagnose it, so appropriate treatment could be given. So here we would reduce the mortality from 30% for those who have not treated to about 1. Okay, about 1%. Now about carriers. So carriers, the most important one is identification. Okay, carriers are identified by culture and serological examinations. The duodenal drainage establishes the presence of salmonella in the biliary tractine carriers. So important point I told you is to identify the carriers. So usually it is seen that the VI antibodies are present in about 80% of these chronic carriers. Then the next important point is the treatment of these carriers. So the carriers should be given an intensive course of ampicillin or amoxicillin, that is 4 to 6 grams a day, together with probenecid, that is 2 grams per day for 6 weeks. These drugs are concentrated in the bile and may achieve eradication of this carrier state in about 70% of the carriers. So next important point for these carriers is the surgery. Cholecystectomy with concomitant ampicillin therapy is regarded as the most successful approach to the treatment of these carriers. Surveillance. So the carriers should be kept under surveillance. They should be prevented from handling food, milk or water from for others. Health education, again a very important mode, that is health education regarding washing of hands with soap, and especially after defecation or urination and before preparing food. Okay, so the most important thing here, what you need to know is that the elimination of typhoid fever, so for this elimination, working on the carriers or reducing the carriers is very important. Control of sanitation. Okay, so protection and purification of drinking water supplies, improvement of basic sanitation and promotion of food hygiene are essential measures to interrupt transmission of typhoid fever. Immunization. Now, it is recommended to those living in endemic areas or the household contacts, groups at risk of infection such as school children and hospital staff, travelers proceeding to these endemic areas, or those attending melas or yatras. Okay, so for all these we can ask them to get immunized. Anti-typhoid vaccines. Parenteral killed whole cell vaccines containing the VI polysaccharide is given in a single dose, subcutaneous or intramuscular. Protection begins 7 days after injection, maximum protection being reached by 28 days. Parenteral killed whole cell vaccine. Efficacy was 72% 1.5 year after vaccination, and it was 55% 3 years after a single dose. The vaccine is approved for persons aged over 2 years. Revaccination is recommended every 3 years for travelers. The old parenteral killed whole cell vaccines were effective, but they produced strong side effects. So two safe effective vaccines are now licensed and are available. One is the subunit antigen and the other one is the whole cell live attenuated bacteria. The VI polysaccharide vaccine. It is a subunit vaccine which was first licensed in the United States in 1994. It is composed of purified VI capsular polysaccharide from the TY2 S. typhi strain, and it elicits a T cell independent IgG response. Okay, and it is not boosted by additional doses. It is given subcutaneous or intramuscularly, and the target value for each single human dose is about 25 micrograms of this antigen. Now this vaccine is stable for 6 months at 37 degrees Celsius and for 2 years at 22 degrees Celsius. But usually what is recommended is you need to store it by 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. And the VI vaccine does not elicit adequate immune response in children less than 2 years. That's why the schedule, or it is given to individuals who are aged more than 2 years, and one single dose is given and we get the immunity by 7 days after the after injection of this vaccine. To maintain, or you can say for protection, revaccination is recommended every 3 years. A word about safety, that no serious side effects are seen, very minimal local side effects are seen with this vaccine, and very less of you can say no contraindications for this vaccine unless they have had a previous severe hypersensitivity reaction to this vaccine component. Otherwise it is safe. Even we can give it to HIV infected individuals, but we need to know that to have protection, for induction of these protective antibodies, it is related with the CD4 cells, okay, CD4 T cells, okay. Another important thing what you need to know is it can be co-administered with other vaccines which are relevant for international travelers, like the yellow fever, hepatitis A, and other vaccines which are routinely given in childhood immunization program. The live oral TY21A vaccine. So it was first licensed in Europe in 1983 and in USA in 1989. So it's orally administered. It's a live attenuated TY2 strain of this S. typhi, which includes multiple genes, including the genes responsible for the production of this VI polysaccharide, which has been mutated chemically. Okay, so this vaccine is available as enteric coated capsule, and this protection is influenced by a number of factors, that is the number of doses, how well it is spaced. Okay, so all these play an important role in the protection. So as such, we don't have any field trials to document the efficacy of this TY21A vaccine in children less than 3 years. So what we recommend is, usually for the schedule is for individuals aged more than 5 years. Okay, so about the storage, it is stored somewhere between 2 to 8 degrees, and okay, the storage is at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, and it retains the potency for approximately 14 days at 25 degrees Celsius. Now about the schedule. So I already told you that for individuals more than 5 years it is given, and the vaccine is given every other day, that is on day 1, 3 and 5th day. Okay, and this 3-dose regimen is usually recommended. So once we finish this 3rd dose, the immunity what we get is after the after 7 days after taking this last capsule, and it usually lasts for 3 years. That's why we say that booster can be given after every 3 years. Okay, now the other important thing is, if now every 3 years for people living in endemic areas. Now if an individual has to go to an endemic area from a non-endemic area, for such person we can say that these 3 doses could be taken every year. Okay, then about this vaccines, this vaccine can be given simultaneously with other vaccines. Okay, like the other live vaccines also, like polio, cholera, yellow fever, measles, mumps, rubella. Okay, so it could be given. Now about few other important aspects about this vaccine. Safety and precautions. Progonil and antibacterial drug should be stopped from 3 days before until 3 days after giving this TY21A vaccine. As such, drugs may harm live bacterial vaccines. Okay, the vaccine is unlikely to be efficacious if it's administered at the time of having a diarrhea. And another important thing is, you don't know whether it could harm the fetus if this vaccine is given during pregnancy. It is safe to give this vaccine to HIV patients, especially asymptomatic individual as long as the T cell count is more than 200 cubic mm. So the another important thing what you need to know is TY21A is remarkably well tolerated and it has a low rate of any side effects. Then the tiforal vaccine is not recommended in congenital or acquired immunodeficiency which includes treatment with these drugs, that is immunosuppressive and antimitotic drugs, acute febrile illnesses or acute intestinal any intestinal infections. Thank you.